We want to say welcome back to the Heights podcast. At Heights Baptist Church, our mission is to love and to lead all people to a new life with Christ. And one of the ways that we do that is by creating content like this podcast. On the Heights podcast, we like to talk about faith, culture, and the church, and to help you take your next step on your faith journey. My name is Matt. I'm one of the pastors of Heights Baptist Church in Alvin, Texas. And this week, I am joined by a very special guest. This is David Peoples. David, welcome to the program.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
David, a lot of our audience is probably not going to know, but you have actually been a big part of our podcast from the very beginning.
I have.
When we started podcasting 3 or 4 years ago, you were actually our engineer. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that happens when your dad is the pastor is sometimes you get sort of pressed into service, like stuff like that.
Yep.
I know I have a son named David too, and he has frequently been brought along for tech help on various things. But you finishing junior high, just started high school when we started podcasting, and you were our engineer every single week.
I was.
And so even though you were almost never on camera, you have been a huge part of this podcast, going all the way back to the beginning. So I am super excited that you are on camera for the first time, and we are excited to have we have had David as a part of our team in an official capacity this summer because you have been going through a worship ministry internship, which pretty much means you've been continuing to serve in our student worship ministry, in our main service worship ministry, serving behind the scenes in the text ministry, and then you had to put up with me for a couple of hours a week. That's basically what we've been doing.
Yeah.
But it's been fun. I mean, I think it's been fun. I don't know if it's been fun.
No, it's been a blast.
We've drunk a lot of coffee.
We have.
We've had some great conversations.
Oh yeah.
We've had some good debates. But you're at the place where you kind of have a big kind of life change about to happen. So tell me a little about David Peoples. Tell me about like who you are and what you've been doing in life and what you're about to do.
Yeah. So I now more recently in my recent years get to identify as a musician. I started out when I was about 8 in musical theater. So I used to be an ex-theater kid. I know. I tell people that all the time and they're like, ugh. And I'm like, I know, but like I'm cool, right? I'm like the cool theater kid.
Is being a theater kid a little bit like being a Marine though? Like there's no such thing as an ex-theater kid. Like you're always a theater kid. Even if you're not doing theater, you're still a theater kid.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
I still kind of dip my toes into Broadway.
I love it.
Pop in every now and then. But and then after theater, I really realized that what I loved about musical theater was the music and not so much the theater. So I started playing acoustic guitar, was where I started out. And then after a couple months of playing acoustic guitar, as I was trying to figure out kind of freshman year of high school, like what am I going to do with my life? I really started to feel the call to worship ministry. So I talked to my current and past then now guitar teacher, Brad, and I was like, hey, you know what? I think I feel a call to worship ministry. So let's pivot from like, what we're doing now and let's focus on more kind of worship stuff. So we started working through on that. I started volunteering in our church's youth ministry. I was playing guitar up there. And then after I kind of had a handle on guitar, then I started figuring out, okay, well, if I want to be a worship leader, I can't just sit there and play the guitar in silence in the background. Got to figure out how to use my voice. Got to talk in front of a crowd, which I had already been good at from musical theater.
From theater, yeah.
And then got to figure out how to sing. So started singing in youth, kind of winging it. I got a really good piece of advice early on. I think it was from you, actually. You told my dad, don't let him take music lessons until he's over 18 because his voice might change.
Oh, specifically voice lessons.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah. That makes sense.
I was like, no voice lessons. My voice might change. I'll just wing it. So hopefully in college, number one thing I'm going to do, take voice lessons.
Excellent.
Figure out how my voice works. But yeah, and then after that, started moving into playing acoustic guitar on a Sunday morning at, we call it Big Church.
Big Church, yeah.
Our actual service every morning. And then through the internship, I've led worship once and kind of co-led a Sunday or two. So yeah, it's been awesome.
That's fantastic. And you have just recently finished high school.
I have.
And so kind of what are your kind of big plans coming up? Like, what are you going to be doing in the next few weeks?
Yeah, so right now I'm just in like packing mode and figuring out everything I need. I have a giant bin in my room full of a bunch of stuff that my mom and I bought on Prime Day that
nice.
recently happened at time of recording. And just kind of throwing everything in there, kind of checking off the list. I'm kind of past the point of nervous about going to college, and I'm just excited.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure kind of closer I get, I'll start to get nervous again. But at that like 3-week out point, I'm like, dude, let's go.
Yes.
Let's do this. Like,
That's awesome.
My ties are not... Saying ties are cut sounds awful, but, you know, friendships are starting to change to, you know, I'm not going to see you as much, but I'll still see you.
Right.
So, but yeah.
Because you're going away to school.
Yep.
Our campus is in the Houston area, and you're going to be attending college in Dallas.
Yes.
You're going to Dallas Baptist?
Dallas Baptist. Yep.
Excellent. Do you have a major picked out yet?
Yes, so my major will be communications in church media.
Nice.
Which is a really long title.
So you're going to come back and you're going to teach me some things.
Hopefully. But all I know about it right now is freshman year, I'll be taking Intro to Broadcasting.
Okay.
Because DBU has their own broadcasting team that broadcasts all of their sporting events.
Gotcha.
It's
okay.
student-led. So that's a class I will be taking, Intro to Church Technology, which I'm assuming is just going to be like, here's ProPresenter.
Yeah.
This is how you use ProPresenter.
It's going to be a lot of the stuff that you already know, yeah.
Cool, I know ProPresenter already. But
yeah. But hopefully you'll get a chance to play with some really cool toys.
Oh, absolutely.
And to see some, you know, some bigger scale, some bigger budget stuff than like we might have at our particular local church. So that'll be really cool.
Oh yeah.
So when it came to so talk to me a little bit more about kind of the call to worship ministry. You kind of mentioned that, and that might be something that some of our listeners or some of our viewers might kind of wrestling with, is like what were sort of the thoughts, feelings, emotions, prayers? What were you kind of feeling that led you to think like, I think God might be calling me to ministry? Like, tell me a little more about that.
So super early on, when I kind of started feeling the call, I looked inwardly as I prayed, and I was like, I was trying to figure out why I was attracted to the idea of worship leadership. Because, you know, one of the common issues with worship leadership could be pride.
Sure.
Like, I'm getting up there, making myself the star for half the service. I'm going to be awesome. So I looked inwardly, and I remembered my times in musical theater. And I remembered every time I would go up for curtain call and we were doing our bows. And I remembered that everybody cheering and clapping for me made me feel really uncomfortable. And I really didn't like it.
Gotcha.
So I was like, okay, pride it's probably not the root.
I'm not doing this because I want the spotlight.
Right.
Because I've had the spotlight, and that's not what I'm looking for.
Spotlight, not for me.
Gotcha.
So then I checked that off, and I was like, okay. And I was trying to think, like, why do I feel the call? Like, what about my personality and my skill sets matches, right? So I started looking at myself, and I'm like, well, I'm great talking in front of people. I've always loved music since a kid. Music has been a really big part of my life. I've always wanted to learn how to play musical instruments, of which, at that point, I started to learn acoustic guitar, and I dabble in a lot of other things for fun. And then I really just started praying, and I was like, if this is right for me, like, give me some opportunities to like feel it out, and then I'll feel. So, and then I started playing in the stage in the youth group and stuff like that. And then I started to realize, like, I kind of just had that feeling of like, this is it, right? Like, it's the most comfortable I've ever felt in my life. When I'm up there,
it just feels really natural.
Yeah, it feels natural, and it kind of feels like I'm fulfilling my purpose.
Gotcha.
So after I felt all those things and I prayed a little bit more, I was like, okay, you know what? I think this is it. Like, I'm gonna do this.
I love it.
So
and praise God for that. Like, you've been such a huge I mean, I know I'm just going to sit here and brag on you for the whole podcast episode, but you've been such a huge blessing to our ministry. I'm just thinking, this week we're in the midst of Survival Week, which is our biggest student ministry event. It's kind of our big summer close, kind of kickoff to the school year. We've got a big band every night, and you've been on front of house mixing every single night. And that comes after spending a lot of hours through this past summer learning how to work the ins and outs of an X32 mixing console, learning, actually probably way more than I know about kind of the ins and outs, because I actually haven't been on that board a whole lot. I spend a fair amount of time on the board that we have in our worship center, but I've not spent a lot of time on the X32, which is the new console that we're using over in the student ministry. But Keith has, and so Keith has spent a lot of time with you, showing you how to do stuff. But so just your ability to do that just enhances the worship experience for everybody that's in that room. There have been a lot of years that we've done kind of big events like this, and one of us is mixing on an iPad, or one of us is running back and forth between the soundboard and the stage. Because when you have a really small team, that's what you do. And I see guys on social media and some of the like Facebook groups that I'm on, that's what they do. I know bass players who are mixing from the stage. I know keyboard players who are mixing. I know drummers who are mixing from the stage. And you know what? If God has given you those abilities, like, I don't want to knock that at all. Like, praise God for the guys that are willing to do that. Like, I think that's awesome. But the fact that we've got somebody who is willing to say, like, yeah, I can take these 4 days and I can do all the mixing so that the musicians can focus on music and leading worship. Like, that enhances the worship experience for everybody that's there, for the whole crowd of people that are there. And so that's like a huge blessing to me. You've been a blessing to me, like when you've been willing to cover a camera, when you've been willing to cover ProPresenter, when you've been willing to cover lighting, when you've been able to do, on short notice at the last minute, I don't have anybody. And, Pastor Lee says, well, let me call David, see what he's doing, and it's not like you don't. It's not like you don't have other stuff going on. You're a busy teenager. Tell me a little bit about how you spend a lot of the other hours during your week when you're not hanging out at the church.
Okay. So it used to be, even during the summer, it was work, church, and school. Because I made some poor math-related decisions in my senior year, and I decided to just push one of the math classes, to the summer. I'm like, I can take it it's computer math. I can do it during the summer. So recently, I finished that a couple of weeks ago.
Praise God.
Still super excited. So now I have some free time.
Nice.
More free time than I have regularly. But when I'm not at the church volunteering or not at work, I usually just kind of sit at home, unless my friends are out doing something. Don't get me wrong. I do really enjoy hanging out with my friends. I love it, but I also like time to myself.
Gotcha.
Sitting there. So I usually, practice my guitar. If I can find like a quiet space of the house where nobody else is trying to do something important. And if they are, then I put the guitar back in its stand, because I play acoustic guitar and it's loud. And usually scroll through stuff on my phone. I used to be a big video game guy, so whip the dusty Xbox back out and play like 2 hours and then have to go do something else.
Gotcha.
But yeah.
Video games in moderation.
Yep.
What do you do for work?
I work at the Chick-fil-A here in our area. I'm a team leader. So I always have to explain that to people, because they're like, what is a team leader? And I found that the best explanation for it is I'm an assistant manager. I'm an assistant to the assistant manager.
You're an assistant to the regional manager?
Absolutely. Yep.
That's awesome.
So kind of throughout the day, I pick up some of the slack that maybe like a manager or an assistant manager has got too much stuff going on. I can kind of handle some of the smaller things. Something that ties really well back into ministry as kind of a leader, right? Especially sometimes, depending on like the size of a church, as the worship leader, you may also be the IT guy.
Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes you could be the youth guy. I'm prepping for that. I'm reading some books.
That's good.
Talking to our youth pastor here, and I'm like, how do you connect with the youths? Because I might have to do that.
I have heard it said. Now, I have not. I've spent a lot of time kind of youth ministry adjacent. I've spent a lot of time doing worship for student ministry, but that meant that usually the way in which I serve student ministry is kind of like really specific. It's typically the stage, it's the songs, it's helping build and disciple the youth band, but it's not, and usually I'm not like the messy game person.
Yeah.
And usually I'm not like that, but I have heard guys talk about the fact that like you stop being cool pretty early.
Yep.
It's like you don't have to be very far into your 20s before you're not cool anymore. And so like some of the best advice I've ever heard is don't try. Like don't try and still be cool. Just kind of embrace who you are, because who you are is awesome. I always thought that was good advice.
Yeah, that's good.
Let's talk a little bit about Chick-fil-A for a minute.
Okay.
Because I think there's some. I don't know about you, but I'm a big fan. Like I'm a big fan of Chick-fil-A.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that I've always been kind of curious about is because like the Chick-fil-A, I mean, the food itself is definitely like a cut above what you would get if you would go to another fast food place. The quality is like a notch up. The quality of the experience when you go to Chick-fil-A is just, there's no comparison. Like you can go anywhere else in town, you are not going to have the kind of quality experience that you have when you go to Chick-fil-A, but yet it's not that much more expensive. You know what I mean? Like it's not like I'm spending way more money on Chick-fil-A than I am if I'm at Whataburger or something. So like how does Chick-fil-A do that? How do they create a product and an experience for the customer that is such a huge difference over a lot of the other fast food chains when it's not that much more expensive?
Yeah. So one thing that I've learned over the years working at Chick-fil-A, I've worked there about 2 years, maybe 2 years and a half, kind of lost count at this point, is one of the big fundamental, yes, that's the word, one of the big fundamental pieces of Chick-fil-A is excellence, right? We're always striving for excellence. But one thing that's kind of pushed right up behind that excellence is kind of a drive for the excellence, right? It's not like we just want to be as perfect as possible because that's what we have to do, right? We have a really, at least at my Chick-fil-A, so Chick-fil-A's are operator based. So there's like corporate Chick-fil-A that lays some ground rules and it's like, this is, what you have to do specifically. And then they kind of franchise out. I think I used the wrong word there. But they have a selection process for their operators that are like their owners, that they select somebody to then have their own Chick-fil-A. And then based off of the operator, then some different things are different.
Gotcha.
So our operator at our local Chick-fil-A's name is Craig, and I absolutely love him. He's a great man. But one of the things that he really pushes is excellence to feed the community.
Okay.
Right? Like our big thing is we just don't want to be perfect. We want to be perfect to help the people around us.
Gotcha.
It's a very like Christian almost message.
Uh-huh.
Right? It's not specifically in there that like we serve this because God calls us to, but you can definitely feel that it's in there.
You're kind of reading between the lines.
Yeah, if you read, you're like, yeah, this is, you know, Chick-fil-A basically operates off of some of the calls from the Bible.
I can see that. And I can see how that would be. There's a difference between like, we want to be excellence because because corporate said so, and we want to be excellent because we're taking care of people. Mm-hmm. And oh wow, that's very different. That's subtle, but it's very different. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think about, you know, and ultimately like what we want to do is take care of people. Interesting. I also kind of love what you said about it's not just a desire to be excellent, but it's creating a culture of a drive for excellence, which those are two different things too. You know, and if I kind of think of that kind of in a worship context, I mean, you want to have a worship experience. You want to have a worship service where you've put in the time, you've put in the preparation, you're not playing wrong notes, you're not messing up, you know, you're in tune, you're in the groove, you're in the pocket. And ultimately, the reason we want to do that is not because we're awesome and we love the spotlight, but it's because we want to eliminate distractions. So one of the, I know I've said it before and I'll say it again, but one of the best quotes I ever got was from Norm Stockton, who plays bass for Lincoln Brewster. And he said, if you're playing a groove and you accidentally play a bar of 7 when it was supposed to be a bar of 8, he's like, people all in your congregation who don't know anything about music, they don't know what happened, but they know that something happened. And he said it like this, and this is always like, I'm going to remember this forever. He said, when you mess up like that, people all over your congregation that don't know anything about music are violently ripped out of the throne room of heaven. And I was just like, when he said that, I was like, dang, like, oh my gosh, that's hard. But the call was to play skillfully unto the Lord, not to show off that we're awesome, but to create a worship experience, because what we're doing is facilitating the worship of God's people, which means we have to get ourselves out of the way. And part of the way we get ourselves out of the way is to do what we do skillfully, to have put in the time, to put in the preparation, so we don't make, boneheaded like mistakes. And that's going to happen. Like, there's always going to be moments in a live service or live production where, things are going to go a little wonky. Like that happens. And that's part of God's people getting together for worship, but you want to minimize those, but I like the idea, like we don't want to just have a service where like we hit all of our marks and everything was on tempo and we played all the right notes and we played all the right rhythms. Like, we want to create a culture that says, why are we doing what we're doing? And we don't want, I want everything to be excellent. No, we want to create a culture where people have a desire to strive for excellence and to strive for excellence for the right reasons. So I like that. Like, those are two great kind of principles there. How do you get people through the car rider line so fast? In the drive-thru. Okay.
So, I was actually talking to somebody about this earlier. Our system is just great, right? So, I'm just going to break it down. Hopefully, everybody listening to the podcast has at least been through a Chick-fil-A line once. But if you haven't, you're about to get the full breakdown.
Oh, wow.
So, you drive through the line, and we have 2 people right there holding iPads. Those are IPOS. I do not know what that stands for. I just know that's what it's called. And those people are ready to take your order. All right, so we have 2 people out there at the same time, so we can take 2 orders at a time, right? That just speeds everything up. So once you get past there, there'll be another person past kind of the order taking area. Their cash cart. So they're there for the rare times that people use cash, which, hey, I use cash for some things. It's great.
Green paper. What do we do with this?
Yeah. But they're there to just take any cash payments,
Yeah.
right? That speeds it up as well, right? Because if you're the 7th person in line and you have a cash payment, and then you got to wait all the way till you get to the window to then take the cash payment, to then give your change, to then give your drink, to then give your food, that slows us down. Not by much, but it slows us down a little bit. All right, so we have a person out there to kind of eliminate that step. Then this is the big one. I feel this is the most important thing that speeds our drive-thru up. When you pull up to that window, there's a nice smiling Chick-fil-A worker there to greet you outside of the window.
Oh, so you're not having to reach over.
So that position is called Expo, short for expediter.
Right.
And their whole purpose is to hand the car the food no matter where they are. So this was the example I gave earlier. Say Joe is at the window and he's ordered like 7 meals for his entire family and maybe his grandma.
Yeah.
Okay, so
That's
7,
like my car. Yeah.
Yeah, 7 meals to make for the kitchen is going to take a minute.
Yeah.
It's going to take a minute to bag, get into a bigger bag, get all the sauces. But Sally, I think I've used Joe already. No, I haven't. Sally, Joe, and Susie are behind him. And each one of them ordered like 1 drink, maybe a 12 count, and like a cookie.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can do that like that.
Gotcha.
So now on the inside, when the people are bagging the food, they're going to look and they're going to notice that and say, well, you know what? I'm holding for the heavily modified salad that the person in front's grandma ordered.
Right.
but I have everything else for these other 3 orders right here.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to bag these, give these to Window. Window's then going to give it to Expo and say, hey, this isn't the person at the window, but it's the person 2 cars down.
Got it.
And then Expo can just say, not that long of a walk, I can take it. And they take it, hand the food, kind of scoot the cars around a little bit, get it to where Sally can pull around, and she's gone.
And the reason why I'm always the guy who pulls up to the yellow cones is because I'm the guy with the 7 meals.
Yes.
Yeah, and then everybody else is whipping around me because they just had one. Oh.
Yeah.
That is actually that's actually a similar like service restaurants utilize that same feature where you've got an expediter who's kind of coordinating kitchen and wait staff to like make sure everything like hits at the right time. So you're using that same concept in a drive-through.
Yep.
Man, I just think about that. Like going back to the whole idea of that, like Chick-fil-A, the experience is just so far superior to similarly priced products. There are days where we finish up at the church and I really want a hamburger. And I will drive to the Whataburger because I really want a hamburger. But if there's 3 cars in the drive-through, I know I'm going to be there for an hour. And I'm just like, no, like I'm going to do it I'll get a hamburger somewhere else.
Yeah.
But at Chick-fil-A, a lot of times like Chick-fil-A is like on the corner where I get off and to turn to go to work. And there might be 47 cars wrapped around the block and I'll still get in the line because I know I'll be in and out in 15 minutes. Like that's amazing.
Yeah.
So we've talked about kind of the drive for excellence. We've talked about creating a culture of excellence. Is there anything else, like as you've spent time working at Chick-fil-A that were sort of like something that you kind of took with you? They're like, that's something that I'm going to take with me like into the rest of my life or into the rest of my ministry.
Yeah. So one of the things that one of my assistant managers who I really made a close bond with, I knew him before he worked there. And then he was kind of my in to this Chick-fil-A. Gonna say that publicly. He kind of took me under his wing throughout our whole career. He got me up the ladder. And one of the things that I'll really take with him is his way of like kindly guiding.
Okay.
Kind of this image of like, it's kind of like the image of shepherding through the Bible, right? Like one of the big things he taught me before I became a leader is I kind of have 2 sides of a coin to where, how do I explain this? On a regular day-to-day basis, I kind of just, goof off. Kind of a funny guy.
Sure.
But especially in a work setting, I can get very detail-oriented and almost cold.
Okay.
Like if somebody's doing something wrong, my first reaction is to go up and be like, you're doing this wrong, and this wrong. Like,
very analytical. Fix it. Yeah.
Fix it. So he really helped me to kind of change it and be able to like kindly come up beside somebody and kind of lift them up to that point of where they need to be with like grace and kindness. So
I love how you are describing a Chick-fil-A discipleship. That's awesome.
Yeah.
This is my favorite podcast so far. That's fantastic. But seriously, yeah, that will be very helpful. And that's something that we have to do as worship leaders. And like honestly, like it's really, really fun to encourage people that are doing things that are awesome.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things that I get to do as a worship leader is to go to my team and be like, brother, that sounded amazing. Oh my gosh, those harmonies were so tight. Like that was beautiful. That was fantastic. It is not fun when you have to like fix stuff that's not working. It's fix stuff that's not working, in the music like that. That's part of why we're there. That's why we have rehearsals. That's why we have sound checks, but especially if there's like things that need to be fixed, like more like in a relationship thing, that can be kind of hard sometimes, having to kind of do that correction. And so learning how to do that correction in a loving way, in an appropriate way, in a way that exhorts and uplifts instead of just like, those will be very valuable skills. So you're heading off to DBU in a few weeks.
Yep.
As you've been moving through the worship internship here, was there anything that we spent time talking about that kind of like surprised you? Like, oh wow, I didn't know that was, part of the job, or, was there anything that surprised you or was weird?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I kind of knew it existed, but I didn't realize how rabbit holey that you could go down with it, is actually what you and I were just talking about before we started this podcast a little bit. It's your Venn diagram thing.
Okay.
Okay. Like your relationship between what you like as a worship leader and what your congregation likes as a worship leader.
What they like and what they need.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like one of the things early on, when I started feeling the calling to worship ministry, is I started listening to a bunch of different worship music and just kind of making a list in my head of like, oh yeah, I want to do that one day. Oh yeah, I want to do that one day, which is great. You can do that. But as I started this internship, I realized I was like, ooh, you know what? In my head, I was just like picturing myself just making a whole like list of just every song that I wanted to do when I got hired to a church, and that's all I would do. But now I'm kind of realizing kind of what we talked about is like a church already has its music that its people like. Mm-hmm. And you as a worship leader, especially a new worship leader, have to figure out how to come in. And you don't have to do everything specifically that the last guy did in the same order, but familiarity is one thing that really helps a congregation. So kind of learn how to take some of that that's previously in like the roots and the DNA of a church, mm-hmm. and kind of make it your own and figure out how to use it to effectively lead the congregation to God.
Yeah. What I always say is the first rule of worship leading is play songs they know.
Yep.
Play songs they know, play songs that they love. And we've talked about like the whole idea of worship leadership being like a set of Venn diagrams. And so on the one hand, you have like the music that you know, that you love, that lights your heart on fire, that you're capable of playing and that you're familiar with. Mm-hmm. And then there's a whole body of music that your congregation knows, loves, lights their heart on fire, that allows them to connect with the one true God. And where those two Venn diagrams intersect, that's where worship happens between the worship leader and the congregation. And so over time you can mold and stretch those Venn diagrams a little bit, because you're going to teach them new songs. They're going to teach you some songs. You're going to learn some of the songs that are their favorite songs, and so those kind of Venn diagram circles, those are not fixed. They're always going to be in motion. Because you're going to have new people joining your church, and you're going to have things are going to be changing. The culture of your church changes over time, but ultimately, what it's about meeting the people where they are. Because ultimately, the most important thing that we're doing as worship leaders is encouraging our people to worship, to be in the throne room.
Absolutely.
And so we've talked a lot about that. So usually my kind of rule of thumb on a Sunday is like, don't play more than one song that's new. Mm-hmm. Try and, or if you've got two songs that are kind of newish, that are not super familiar, make sure that you include some songs that they're real familiar with, that they're really comfortable with, because they're going to be able to worship,
Yeah.
And those of us that are musicians, like we experience that. Like the first time we listen to a song, we're like, oh wow, that song's great, but like we don't know the words. We're looking at the screen, we're waiting for the pro presenter guy to push the button. It's like, there were a lot of times I went to camp with the junior hires a couple weeks ago, and I think I probably knew about half the songs, and about half the songs were songs I'd never heard before. And there were moments when the pro presenter guy was late, and I was like, even me as a professional musician who's been leading worship for a living for a decade and a half, I'm still waiting for that next word because I don't know the song.
Right.
And so that's, all the more reason why, obviously we want to sing a new song unto the Lord. We want to encourage our people to new, different, expressions of worship. We're going to want to change style and change culture and things over time. But at the beginning, you definitely want to meet them where they're at, mm-hmm. and say, how do we worship together?
Yeah.
So that's good. I think that's a good takeaway. Growing up as a PK, mm-hmm. Your dad's a lead pastor. Yep. Your mom is involved in church ministry. was there anything that was particularly hard about that, like growing up? I'm thinking specifically because I got a bunch of kids that are, coming up behind you, and I'm thinking like, what are some things that I can do as a pastor and as somebody who's involved in ministry to encourage my kids to love the Lord and love the church? And
yeah. So for me, really the only kind of struggle that I have with it is there's a lot of people that I meet on a day-to-day basis that know me, and I have no clue who they are.
Gotcha.
Actually, when I was at work a couple days ago, there were a group of people that came through, and they were like, "Hey, you're the pastor's son." And I was like, "Yeah, great to see y'all." And they were like, "Yeah, great to see you too." And I was like, "Will I see y'all on Sunday?" And they were like, "Absolutely." And I was like, "Great." And then they left, and I was like, I don't know who those people are, but I'm going to look for them on Sunday. And you know what? I did see them that next Sunday.
That's
I was
awesome.
searching the crowds, and I was like, oh, those are the people from the Chick-fil-A line.
That's fantastic.
Nice. But growing up as a pastor's kid, for me, personally, there wasn't really anything that I struggled with.
Uh-huh.
I think it's mostly based on personality.
Okay.
Right? Because, like, PKs, I found out growing up, especially going into, like, a setting where some people are, like, kind of in and out of church and not, like, super invested. Apparently, the general consensus is PKs are terrible. It's apparently what I found out.
I have heard that before.
Yes, as a kid who was homeschooled through elementary school, came into middle school, telling everybody I'm a pastor's kid, and a lot of people going, ew. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But again, I think that just goes back to, like, personality.
Sure.
Right. But one thing that I think my parents did as I was growing up that I think helped a lot is they just served.
Uh-huh.
My mom, she does a lot with different special needs ministries, things around the church. There's a lot of Sundays where she's not in the worship service because she's somewhere serving.
Got it.
And one of my favorite things that my dad does is no matter what church he's at, he always takes Sundays to not preach to the best of his ability and goes and serves somewhere on a Sunday. And even not on a Sunday where, yes, pastors do work, not on Sunday.
This is fact check true.
Yes, they have other responsibilities week to week. He still finds time to show up at some youth events, when I think it was last year when our kids ministry was meeting, he was the rec leader about every other week.
Dodgeball, yes.
I think, yes. So again, that is awesome. And that shows me as, his son, like, this is how we love and serve the Lord. And as demonstrating that love and that servitude in a good way, then that kind of imparted onto me. And I was like, wow, okay, I see, how much this means to my parents, and I see what they get out of it and how other people love and appreciate it. I want to do that too. So, yeah.
So as a pastor's kid who has recently finished high school, who's ready to move on to college, like, would there be for somebody like me who's got several kids, and they're pastor's kids too, are there any words of wisdom that you would share with a parent like me saying, make sure that as you're raising your kids, do X, Y, and Z, to help them love the Lord, love the church, love to serve?
Yeah. I think number one thing is just kind of show them that, like, godly love. Like, that was just one thing that my parents did. Frequent conversations about the Bible and kind of the gospel. That was, growing up, my parents never really, like, forced it on me. But they made it apparent that, like, if I ever had any questions or wanted to talk about it, they would be fully open. And again, they would try and, like, spark conversations out of nowhere, but they were very good at not, like, this is the Bible, you're a pastor's kid, Jesus, like, straight, kind of forcing it on me. He was very, like, both of them were very, like, you're a pastor's kid, but, the real important thing is what you believe.
Gotcha.
And kind of guiding me through that. So, yes, I think that would be my number one advice is just kind of just show them the Word of God and be like, this is amazing. Like, I love this. And eventually they hopefully will love it too.
I was at a Sean McDowell event several months back, and that was his encouragement to parents that are raising kids, especially when it comes to questions about the Bible and about the faith. He said, first of all, have a faith that's worth emulating.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you want your kids to grow up, you know, loving Jesus, then step one, love Jesus.
Yeah.
Let your kids see that. He said, and then just bring up conversations about who God is and the faith and the Bible in the natural course of life.
Yeah.
And I think about Deuteronomy. I think about the Shema when it says, you know, and you're going to share these things with your children, and you're going to talk about it when you get up in the morning, and you talk about when you go to bed, and you talk about it when when you're walking and when you're running and when you're doing your chores. You know, and so I think there's wisdom there to not that like having a very intentional like family worship or family devotional time is a negative thing. I think it's a positive thing.
Oh yeah.
But like, we don't want, you know, all right guys, it's Bible time, you know, open. It's like our entire life is a life of loving and serving and following Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so live that life yourself, and then encourage your children to do the same thing. You know,
Yeah.
What does it mean to follow Jesus? Well, this is how mom and dad follow Jesus. Do you have any questions about you know, as you watch mom and dad follow Jesus, you know, and
Yeah.
that very natural progression. That's good advice. That's really good advice. Well, man, you have been such a blessing to our church, specifically to our worship ministry and to our tech ministry. And you have been a huge blessing to the podcast. Because of course, you know, for years and years, you were always the producer,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful to have spent the years working alongside you. I've been so grateful to watch your gifts and talents and calling kind of grow over time, to watch you learn and add things to your skill set and grow in your ability to lead and to play and to sing. And I am just so excited to see what God is going to continue to do in your life as you head off to college and beyond. We're only, about 5 hours away? So, you know, if you want to come home and do some laundry and play on a Sunday morning, you know, we're only 5 hours down the freeway. So,
yeah.
Hopefully, like, you won't be a stranger, and we'll still be seeing you from time to time.
Definitely.
And I want to just say thank you so much. Thank you for the huge blessing that you have been to me and to our team and to Heights and to our church. And I want to say thank you for being with us on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you.
And I want to say thank you for taking the time to watch or to listen to the Heights podcast. We are so grateful to have David with us here. We worship in person every Sunday morning, and we would love to see you at one of our services. Starting in the month of August, we will be worshiping at 9 a.m. and at 10:30, and we'll have life groups for all ages during both of those hours. And we also stream our services to Facebook and to YouTube. We really appreciate David Peoples, who's been one of our main camera people for that for several years, and we're going to have to figure out how to replace him because we're going to have an empty slot in our roster when he goes to school. But we stream to Facebook and YouTube. And so you can check us out there. You can follow us on social media. And if you've got more questions about what it means to love and to lead all people to a new life with Christ, we invite you to visit our website at heightschurch.org. We'll see you next time.